Have you ever wondered what it really takes to get a PhD? Not just the long nights and the research grind, but the purpose behind it, the doors it opens, and how it could shape your career and confidence. Welcome back to One in STEM podcast. If you're new here, hi, I'm your friend in STEM, Mary, and this podcast is all about exploring the real stories, decisions, and lessons that shape careers in science, tech, engineering, and math. Today, we're going behind the scenes of the PhD journey with someone who knows it inside and out. Dr. Lauren DiNicenzo is the program director of the Doctor of Business Administration at Drexel University, a renowned professor and a major advocate for applied research and executive education. If you are considering a doctorate, or even just questioning whether it's the right path for you, this episode is packed with clarity, insight, and inspiration. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. See you in the episode. Lauren, I'm so excited to have you on the podcast. I've been looking forward for this conversation and all things that has to do with PhD and what it takes to pursue a PhD and sort of what that journey looks like. I know so many people are going to tune in and learn a lot of things about what it takes. So let's jump right into it.
Wonderful. It's so great to be here.
So I want to start from the beginning. What was the moment that made you decide to pursue a PhD?
So that's a great question. I think if you were to ask me when I was younger and going through grade school, a PhD would have been the furthest thing from my mind. And I probably would have said, no, absolutely not. I will never do that. So just thinking about getting to the moment where I was considering it is quite interesting because it was never on my radar. In reflecting back, I think the moment that I decided to do it, I was a softball coach at Georgetown University. So it was after I got my master's degree, I got a master's degree in sport management. I took on a coaching role. I have always considered myself to be an athlete my whole life. That's just been my identity. I've always been a part of team sports in particular. And being in this job, this was at a point in my life where I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do. I was in my early to mid 20s. Wasn't quite sure that I could give up my identity as an athlete just yet, and so decided to go into coaching and really enjoyed it. Enjoyed the players, enjoyed working with them, seeing the growth. In my second year of coaching, just didn't feel that same motivation towards the sport. And as I started reflecting, realized that I needed something that was different, something that was challenging in a different way. And I think being in an academic environment, being at Georgetown and listening to the players in our van ride from the school over to the field, what they were doing in the classroom, the projects that they were working on, hearing discussions of the faculty athlete advisor, and thinking, oh, if I was a faculty member, I would do that, but I'm not, right? I'm a coach, so that's not me. But I think all of those things kind of got me thinking that coaching wasn't going to be it for me, that there was going to be something else. And I started to think, well, what is that something else? And the more I reflected on things, I'm a problem solver by nature. Anything in front, you can give me something little and it will bother me if I don't have the answer until I figure it out. And so thinking about those things that I had questions about or wanted to solve, it all came back to the workplace and past jobs that I've had. And I didn't quite know what that meant for me, so I just started searching online and came across this field of organizational behavior that I had never heard of. And as I started reading about it, I thought, oh God, this is exactly what I think I want to do. It marries these things of understanding people, being able to work with people, solve problems in the workplace. And so it was at that moment that I started thinking, maybe a PhD is something I want to do.
I love that. I feel like so many people jump from, okay, I'm doing my undergrad, need to do my master's. Like they jump from one degree to another, not really taking a step back and trying to figure out, okay, if a PhD is something for me. But hearing your story and how you're like, okay, I took a step back and I realized that I need more, or there's something more for me out there. And that's why I took that leap into going into a PhD program. And so many people, they hesitate when they think about the time, the cost, the effort of a PhD. What was going through your mind during that decision-making process?
So frankly, I don't think I fully understood what a PhD was all about. I knew that it was going to involve research. And from doing the reading online, that's what I thought the job was going to be about. I knew for a PhD that it was a full-time position. The stipend that you receive as a PhD student is not that great, but I had also been used to living on not very much and just making things work. So there was no real pay cut for me or challenge in that way. I knew that I'd figure out a way to make it work on the student stipend. And then I don't think I fully appreciated the amount of time that it was going to take. So I guess in a way, I went into it a little bit blind and didn't realize that there was going to be a teaching component, how intensive the seminars would be and what the readings would be like. And you ask questions during the interview process and you try to gather all this information. But I think until you're actually in the program and experience it, that you don't fully understand. So all of those considerations, maybe it was the fact that I was much younger and just I didn't have anyone around me who had a PhD. So I didn't really fully understand what some of those sacrifices or the time commitment was going to be until I got in there.
And so I feel like for me personally, I don't know what a PhD program entails. And for the listeners out there who don't know what a PhD program has, can you sort of give a description of what to expect when going into a PhD program?
Yeah, so the first 2 years of a PhD program are very content-based, seminar-based. That's where you're learning all of the different types of methodologies, skills, like how we can actually conduct research. You're learning about research design. You're taking seminar courses to learn about specific content areas. So for example, in my field, I would take a seminar course on organizational behavior and leadership. I took a course on teams, organizational teams. Part of my program, we were a mixed department. So in the Department of Management, we had both organizational behavior and strategy scholars. So I would take some strategy courses as well, organizational level theory, entrepreneurship classes. And those classes, for each one, you take 2 of those seminars typically each semester, along with a methods class. And each of those classes would be anywhere around 6 or so readings a week. And so you're reading 40-page papers. So having multiple classes was a lot of reading and then on top of that, having the methods course, like a statistics-based course and needing to work through problem sets. And that was every week. So each week was very cognitively demanding. There were some weeks that I didn't think that I'd be able to get through all of the readings or retain everything because there's a lot of information coming at you. And then on top of that, you would have either weekly problem sets for a stats class or have to work through different types of project proposals and writing for the seminar classes. So those are the first 2 years. In my program, in the second year, you also started teaching. So I taught 2 undergraduate level classes in organizational behavior. The first year, you have a set of exams to take. The second year, you have a larger set of exams to take, which are the comprehensive exams. At that point, if you pass those, then you become a PhD candidate and you get that official title of ABD, all but dissertation. And then the remaining time you're working on your dissertation and getting that out there. In a PhD program as well, and in my PhD program, all during those years, you're also working on different kinds of research projects. So a lot of them are led by the faculty who are in the department. Sometimes they have something that you'll jump on. Other times it's you that initiate projects. So you're juggling as many as you can. It's really up to you. There's a lot of self-motivation and that comes with it in terms of what you want to get involved in. So there's a lot of juggling of those research projects on top of the coursework and your own research.
So many different dimensions play a role in just a PhD. It's not just a degree. It's not like your normal undergrad. There's a lot of also independence, would you say, that comes with being in a PhD program?
There is. And I learned very quickly and saw this from other students in the program. There were some students who were incredibly motivated and were on 6, 7, 8 projects, and other students who, maybe were a little bit more selective and were only part of 1 or 2, but what you got a part of was your call. You were never forced to be on projects, but at the same time, you know that if I don't get involved in these projects, I'm not going to learn how to do this, right? So there was always, you needed to have that motivation to get involved and see the opportunity to learn different skills, even if sometimes it was grunt work and you're just checking references at the end of a paper. There's a skill in that as well.
And with beyond the degree, what did the PhD journey teach you about yourself?
Oh gosh. So this was an interesting reflection because thinking about that time in my life, it was kind of this critical juncture, I would say. You know, growing up, I grew up in a household where I was not really celebrated for my achievements. I was athletically, but I was put down a lot. I was told I couldn't do things. I was always afraid to speak up. And I think what the PhD program taught me was that all of those things were just a function of the context that I was in. So I was very shy growing up, very introverted. Even today when I'm teaching in a classroom and we'll be talking about personality, and I'll share that I'm an introvert, but I'm up here leading a class and my class will say, that's not true. I'm like, no, I am. I think what the PhD taught me was that even somebody who's shy and introverted, it doesn't mean that you don't have a voice, that you can't speak up and share what's on your mind and contribute to the conversation. Going through my PhD programs, there were a lot of moments where doubt creeped in. Right? Can I handle this? Am I as smart as everyone else around me? In seminars, it always felt like people were asking really great questions or remembering really critical pieces of detail from papers. And I would always think, you know, am I bringing that same level of criticality to my comments? And being a part of that and constantly challenged by my advisor, challenged by those in the classroom. And at the time, too, was when I met my wife, who was incredibly supportive and telling me all of these things that I felt in the past, they're just not true, that I'm deserving of being able to do this. And so I think going through the program helped me to come out of my shell and really appreciate that my voice does matter and that I can think critically about things and I can speak to these difficult concepts, that I can have good conversations with people. And so I really think it changed the trajectory of how I viewed myself, but also the contributions that I'm able to make.
Yeah, it's funny that you said you're an introvert, but you've worn so many hats, like an educator, a researcher, a program director, you're a renowned professor. So all of these hats that you've worn, and yet you still have told yourself like, hey, I'm an introvert, is really like it talks to like really to the words you speak to yourself or what you tell yourself you are capable of doing, and that sort of shapes the way you are or the path that you end up going on.
Yeah, I think the self-talk matters a whole lot. We know in psychology research there's the idea of the Pygmalion effect, right? Your thoughts impact your beliefs impact your actions, and it's this cycle that you go through. And those things about you impact how others think and believe and act towards you. And so it really does start with you in understanding how you want to present yourself, but it can also be triggered by others, right? If others treat us in a positive way, if others want to hear what we're saying, that can trigger some of those positive self-thoughts in us. So I think that there's a lot to do with ourselves, with other people, but then also the context. I reference a lot in my classes this idea that was developed by an early researcher named Kurt Lewin, where he looked at what influences behavior. And it's very simple, right? There's two ingredients. It's personality and the environment. So it's who we are, who we bring to the table, but also the environment that we're in. So if we're in an environment that encourages speaking up or forces us to speak up, then we can do that, right? And over time, we can develop different kinds of habits. A lot of people say, and there's a lot of research that suggests that personality doesn't really change. And so it's kind of open for debate. Is it that we're changing our personality, or is it that the environment is changing how our personality presents itself in terms of our behaviors?
Wow. Yeah, I want to look into that because That's so interesting. So, with everything going on as a PhD student, how did you balance everything? Like work, life, research?
Yeah, so it's interesting. I had a lot of life events come up while I was going through my PhD
Mm.
program. So, like I said, I had met my wife early on. This was as I was deciding to go get a PhD. We wound up getting married my first year in the program.
Hmm.
That was towards the beginning, and then towards the end of my second year, we had a baby. There was a lot that was going on at the time and trying to manage that. I was a high risk pregnancy, so I was in and out of doctor's appointments a lot, which looking back, having the flexibility of being a student really helped because I knew my teaching schedule. I knew when I had to be in the office, and I was fortunate to be part of a department and have an advisor who was just incredibly encouraging and supportive and understood that there were other things besides school that needed to be taken care of. So being able to balance all of that definitely was challenging because when I was pregnant, especially early on, I heard about this thing called morning sickness, and it's a total misnomer, at least for me, because I was just sick all the time. I would go into the office, and I remember sitting with my fellow PhD students. We were all in a room. There were no windows in the room. We put up a poster of some really nice outdoor setting so we can at least look in that and think about what was outside. But I remember everything that people brought in for lunch just made me sick. So I had to find a way to still get my work done and be able to stay in my chair and not have to get up every 5 minutes. And then not to mention, after in my second year, I took my comprehensive exams and I was 38 weeks pregnant. And during that time, it was the summertime. I run hot, period, but running even hotter temperature wise when I was pregnant. So I remember I brought in a big cooler of drinks. I brought a backpack full of books. And then the day I went in for delivery was actually the day I found out I passed my exams.
Wow.
I took some time off over the summer to just be a mom and figure out what that was going to be, but also knew, okay, I don't have a great stipend. It's hard to support a family. At the time, my wife was working, but she wound up leaving her job while I was still in the program later on. And so I knew that I had to do this quickly. I couldn't just sit on this. Once I passed my comprehensive exams and I knew I was all but dissertation, I knew I needed to focus there. And so I just became really good with time management. When my daughter Mia was sleeping, I put her in a rocker. I'm like, I know that I have 3 hours, at least 3 hours to sit and get work done. So I would do that. And then she would wake up, and by that time, my wife Andrea would probably be home from her job, and we would just tag team things. And so it was a lot of just making good use of the time that I had, because the time when Mia was awake or we wanted to do family things, I still wanted to be there for that. Certainly there were times I just couldn't do things because I had to focus on getting work done, but being really good about time management and taking advantage of even small things, sitting in a doctor's office and, okay, I know I can probably get through half of a paper in the waiting room. I'm going to do that. And never letting things kind of sit really helped me get through. And the motivation of being done and having a job that could actually support us and support just doing more than just the basics, that was a big motivator too.
Yeah. You're a super mom. It's so hard to just go through a PhD program on your own, but also to have a child, a newborn, trying to take care of course, with your partner. It was a lot on your plate, but that speaks to the person you are and how determined you were to get this done and be there to be a support for your family. And it's just, every time I hear like stories like these, I'm like, "Ugh, that's why," like, it's just amazing. I have no words because like
Thank you.
you did so much in a very, very big life-changing moment in your life, which sort of shaped you to who you are today. And I do want to pinpoint a thing that you mentioned, how you had director or someone in your team that was helping you out and understanding of your situation. And I do want to point out how having a supportive environment, whether it's in your PhD program or your graduate school or at work, who understands. So it's fine if you you could go to your doctor's appointment or you could do that. So having that support really helps ease the pain and be able to have that balance in your life.
Oh, yeah, it was a huge difference.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't that my advisor didn't push things to get done, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like the expectation was still there that if I was running the analysis for a project, that I would get that done and pass it along. Yeah. Or if my job was to develop the theory and write, that I would be doing that. So it was still delivering on the things that I needed to do in the deadlines, but understanding that it's okay. I don't have to do it 9 to 5, right? There's flexibility in that. And as long as the work gets done, that's really all that matters. And it's important to be there for other things that are going on in your life, and having him understand that balance and being open to having those conversations. I knew I can go into his office and talk to him about these things and say, I've got a doctor's appointment. I've got several this week coming up, or is it okay if it's Mia's birthday coming up the next week, and so I'm going to take some time off of work, right? That's one thing I've always tried to prioritize, is be around on her birthday to celebrate with her regardless of what's going on. But having somebody, an advisor who understands that life is still going on even though you have all these other things, was a huge factor in being able to make it work.
Yeah. That's a blessing during that time. So in what ways has your PhD shaped your leadership, your teaching, or even how you mentor others?
So I think my mentor I've always been someone who's wanted to help other people however I can. It even started when I was going through grade school. I wanted to be a doctor, but I wanted to be a physician. Particularly, I wanted to be a pediatrician. I found medicine fascinating. I asked for a Grey's Anatomy book for Christmas and would just sit and read it. This was before the internet was a thing, so I couldn't just go on and search. Like, I had to sit down and open up this big book and read it. When I got into college, I started getting interested in psychology and how people worked and why people did the things that they did, and trying to explain that, and trying to help people to understand why they act in certain ways or why they did certain things. And so I've always kind of been motivated and found personal happiness in helping other people. And so I think being a part of a PhD program and ultimately now being a faculty member has just given me a really great opportunity to help others in lots of different ways. I can do that with my undergraduates. I ran a course for a while on leadership development and had them develop their own leadership plans and do a lot of self-reflection on what experiences up to that point in their life helped to shape who they are. And so being able to do that through classroom projects, having the opportunity to talk with students outside of the classroom, as they come in and they'll say, hey, I've never heard of organizational behavior, but the class sounded kind of cool, so I took it. And it's actually really interesting. What can you do with this? And so having the opportunity to talk with students about that. And then even moving up, right, with PhD students being able to do the same thing that my advisor did for me, and having the understanding that there are things going on and the balance between getting your work done and taking care of your life responsibilities. And even through our PhD program and our DBA program, being able to help people think through the problems that they're trying to solve through research. So there are things, especially with our DBA program, where we have students who are working professionals. They've been in their careers for a long time. They're experts in their field, but there's still things that are nagging them and problems that they would like to solve in their work. So being able to give people the tools, just the phrasing, how do we think about this? How do we design studies to be able to address these issues? Going through my PhD, I think, has just given me a lot of opportunities to mentor, to provide leadership to everyone from undergraduate students all the way up through our working professionals in our DBA program or even in corporate education. So it's just opened a lot of doors for me.
It's amazing. And so now you lead a program, which is the Doctorate of Business Administration, and it's designed for executive, which are people working full-time while pursuing a rigorous research. What's a unique challenge they face, and how do you support them through it?
I think the biggest challenge for our DBA students is is managing time. Or
Mm-hmm.
I shouldn't even say managing the time, it's having the time to get things done because they're working full time.
Mm-hmm.
They're typically higher up in the organization. They've got a lot of responsibilities. Typically, our DBA students have a family or have others around them that they need to support in some way. And so it is the time to get these things done. So part of that, I think, is just structurally built into the program that we have and trying not to take as many work days away from them to be in the classroom. And so structuring it more in a hybrid sense. So there's some face-to-face time, but then also time where they can work on things on their own. I think getting our students to understand that everyone is having these challenges, right? And being able to build a community to share these challenges, right? How are you getting all this reading done when this time of the year it's our budget time, or we've got a big deliverable at work, or I've got a big family event? How are you managing through that? So giving the students opportunity to talk amongst themselves and creating an environment that they can openly have these conversations, I think has been really helpful. We have something we call our DIGs, they're discussion interaction groups. So they're set up both to support the students to talk about the material and the things that they're learning, but then also to develop that sense of community and find people that they can relate to and have these open conversations. But I think too, just on the faculty side, understanding that things come up, that you've got a last minute work meeting or your kid's sick and you planned on working on this paper Friday and Saturday because you knew that was the only time you had, but your kid's sick now and you need to take care of that. Can you have some extra time? So I think just leading with empathy and understanding that these things happen and that there is a way, again, to balance getting things done and managing everything that's going on.
And for the listeners who are listening to this and they're like, DBA sounds something pretty interesting, who's it for?
Good question. So a DBA is very similar to a PhD, but it's also very different. So a DBA is for somebody who is advanced in their career, who's been in their career, typically we like to say around 10, 15 years. It's somebody who's looking to go back to school, not full-time, right? We're not looking for people who are going to quit their job and just completely dive into the doctorate degree. It's for people who are looking to solve a business problem, but want to do it with something that actually has some backing. So there's a lot of things out there. And I won't give specifics, but there's a lot of things out there that just aren't backed by science, that are cookie cutter approaches that organizations try to do to change behavior, change strategy, manage processes, whatever it is. But a lot of times those things don't work because they're not developed specifically for that context or for those people, for that situation. So the DBA program allows people who have identified problems that they want to solve and then give them the opportunity to learn how to do that through tried and true research practices, through rigorous research. So it's very much the same training, content-wise, methods-wise, that you would get in a PhD program. But the end goal isn't to be a professor like me, isn't to go on a tenure track position and make academia your career. It's for someone who's looking to take those findings back to business, to be able to make a meaningful change. Maybe they're looking to switch career fields. We've had some students who are doing that and saying, hey, I want out of this and I want to do something else. I want to get into consulting. Or maybe I do have this itch to teach. Like I want to be part of a university setting, but I don't want to be a faculty member. So for those who are maybe looking for a career change, a career bump, and we've seen some people who have used it just to move up within their organization. But the key difference between a DBA and a PhD is what you're trying to do with that. The typical PhD tends to be more theoretical and developing theories, writing research papers, whereas the DBA is more applied. So it's taking a business problem out there, and then what can I do with it to make a meaningful impact today with that? Even though I have a PhD, I tend to be more of an applied researcher. I think theory is really interesting. I think it's a great part of research, but I don't think it's everything. I think we need to be able to take it and apply it and make meaningful changes and apply it to lots of different contexts. Because what might work in a healthcare setting isn't going to work in a home improvement store. And why is that the case? And so I've always been driven by this applied part of research. And that's what I would say is the main focus of the DBA, is being able to apply what it is that you're studying.
So if you could go back and give your younger self just starting the PhD one piece of advice, what would it be?
I mean, I think part of this goes to the journey that I had just in terms of self-acceptance. And if I think if I could have gotten there sooner, that the experience early on would have been a little bit more elevated and I wouldn't have had that self-doubt. In reflecting on my PhD journey and how I got there, I kept coming back to this story of when I was in grade school, in an English class in grade school, and I was in high school. And I kept saying, no, that's not it. And then I would keep coming back to it every time. And the alignment was pretty uncanny for me. So I already shared that I'm an introvert, pretty shy. I was that way all throughout my childhood. And they say that people are, public speaking is the number one concern, the fear that people have, even more so than death, right? Death is number two, public speaking is number one. That was me, right? I couldn't picture myself doing that. Again, because I didn't feel confident in my voice. I didn't feel confident in my ability. So in this English class, I think I was in 11th grade, we had to do a dramatic reading of a book. And of course, I'm thinking, this is the worst assignment. I don't want to get up and have to speak in front of the class. What am I even going to read? And it had to be a children's book. It had to be something short. So I remember I went into my bedroom, looked at my bookshelf. I picked out the shortest book I could because I don't want to be up in the class very long. And it was The Velveteen Rabbit. And The Velveteen Rabbit is a story of this stuffed rabbit who is just yearning for, wants to become real, and wants to become real by getting the love of his owner. And it's not until the rabbit realizes that, stop thinking about all the negative stuff and how you look and how you present. Stop thinking about all that. That's when things actually started to get better for the rabbit. So because I hated public speaking and I knew that I would slip up, right? This was my fear. I would just fumble over my words. I practiced so much. And even getting in front of the room, I was still nervous. The vein in my neck was pulsing. I could feel my heart beating out of my chest. I could just feel the red going over my face. And I just kept thinking that everybody must know how nervous I am. So I started reading, and when I'm nervous, my voice shakes. So my voice started shaking with this story. And I got to the end of it. I made it through. I was so nervous the entire time. And I remember going back in my chair, and at the end of the class, my teacher came up to me and she said, that was the most beautiful reading. I could really feel the emotion in your voice, in your delivery. And part of me knew that that emotion was my voice shaking, but it was also a story that really resonated for me personally. And at the time, I didn't realize it because it was just the shortest book off the shelf, but it was the story of self-acceptance. And so I think going into my PhD program, if I could tell myself that I belonged there, that I was just as smart as the other people in my class, that what I had to say was just as important, I was just as capable as everyone else, getting to that point of self-acceptance earlier, I think would have made a difference. But fortunately, I had the support of my advisor. I had incredible support of my wife, who just kept reinforcing, you deserve to be here, even in moments where I didn't think so, and kept reminding myself the PhD is going to be this opportunity where it's almost like a roller coaster. And I tell my students this now too, that there are going to be moments when it's going to be great and you're thinking, this is exactly what I want. The readings are great. The material is great. I'm so interested in this. And then there's going to be other times where you say, what did I get myself into? This is real. It's a lot of work. I just can't find a theory that's going to work. Or I designed a study and it didn't work out. I mean, the rejection in academia, especially when it comes to the percentage of acceptances when you actually submit a journal article, is so small, especially if you're targeting some of the more premier higher journals. Just to be able to have that reinforcement, I had it externally, which I think helped me to get to that point, but I wish I could have gotten myself personally there a little bit earlier.
I feel like so many people struggle with imposter syndrome,
Yes.
telling themselves that they don't belong there, or that person, you just assume from what that person shows you, oh, they know everything and they're super smart. How can I get there? Like, I don't deserve to be there. And your story, I feel like so many people are gonna resonate with, telling themselves like, hey, they don't belong here. So for people who are listening, can you give like 3 main tools or pep talks or whatever it is to help people like get to where you got to after like realizing the acceptance part in the PhD program?
I think the first thing would be to just put yourself out there and embrace the discomfort. We get better when we go through things that are uncomfortable for us, right? It's like the story about how a sword is made. A sword just starts off as this piece of iron, and it's not until it's heated and repeatedly banged that it actually takes its shape and becomes what it's supposed to be. Embracing those moments where you're uncomfortable and putting yourself in those situations, you'll get through it. I think that's really important. Finding other ways. What worked for me too was finding other I'm very competitive. So finding other areas that I could push myself in and achieve something helped me to then do the same with my PhD program. So I became more of a runner in my PhD program, where I would go out and I'd start. And in the beginning, I'd only be able to, do maybe 30, 40 minutes, which for me as an athlete, I didn't really like that. I felt like I should be able to do more.
Yeah.
So then I started giving myself, all right, well, if you can hit this mark, if you can run for this long or this length, if you can do that, you can do a PhD. And so I kept giving myself these other, like these moving targets, but it helped to bring out the competitiveness in me because it helped me to become a better runner. Because I thought, hey, if I give up and I don't keep running and hit my 4 or 5 mile mark, whatever that was, like if I can't do that, then I can't do a PhD. So, and I know I can do this if I push myself, right? So it was more of that mental game and finding other ways to do it. The other thing was making sure that the people around me, people who I know that I could count on. So getting rid of the negative forces, creating boundaries, not letting those voices in, and keeping those people and really focusing on those around me who were supportive, who appreciated me for me, but also were there when I doubted myself, to just be that reminder to say, hey, no, you've got this, you can do this, you're just as capable as everyone else. And having that reinforcement outside too, I think is really important.
And with that being said, would you advise your daughter to go into a PhD program?
Well, right now she wants to be a professional ice hockey player, so I don't know that that's going to happen, but I would. Yeah. I think she's perfect for this kind of career field. She has that same problem-solving nature as me. I was joking the other day, we were at her lacrosse game. She's a goalie, and the goal behind her, there was something wrong with, like, one of the sides didn't snap in or something, and she couldn't quite figure it out. So every time the ball would get to the other side of the field, I could see her tinkering with and trying to set the goal in the right direction or kick around the net and try to get it to actually sit straight versus being tilted. And I joked, I turned to Andrea and I said, I love that this bothers her so much, that she's not just accepting that it doesn't work, that she wants to figure out how it does work. So I think a PhD would be great for her. I think more of a STEM focused field of being able to like get your hands dirty and build things, solve things would be great for her. But I would absolutely recommend a PhD program for her.
Awesome. So finally, for someone who's listening to this and they're debating on whether to take the PhD path, what do they really need to know before committing? If there's one thing they need to know.
So what is your ultimate goal? What's your career goal? If you want to be in academia, you want to be a professor, you want to be writing research, you want to be sharing that research through your teaching, PhD is for you. If you say, I'm interested in the research part, but I don't want to do your job, I don't want to write all the research papers, again, I'd rather be able to take this and apply it to what I'm doing, then I would say PhD is probably not for you. I would go look at more of the DBA path.
Yeah, I love the fact how you said look at what you want to do down the line, because I feel like so many people forget that that's why you want to pursue a PhD,
Yeah.
is because like 10 years from now, where do you want to be? What do you want to do? So saying that is really comforting to me, because like I always tend to be like, okay, 10 years from now, what I want to do I really need a PhD for, or can I like hold off and not do a PhD?
Right. Yeah, exactly. And taking that time, because it is a lot. PhD programs,
Mm-hmm.
5, 6 years of your life. And if you don't want to be in academia, or you don't really see that for yourself, you're not really sure what it is, then hold off on making that commitment.
I agree. Well, I just learned so much from this conversation. Next up is Career Corner. Career Corner is a listener submitted segment where I just ask you questions from our listeners and we give our advice and take on. So the first question is from Amanda, and the question is, I'm 5 years into my corporate career and starting to feel like I want something more, maybe even a doctorate, but I'm scared of the time and cost. How do you know when it's worth to pursue something like a PhD or a DBA?
I think that's a great question, and I'm glad, Amanda, that you're reflecting on this and asking the question, because there are things to consider. Certainly, I just shared with the PhD, it's more geared towards a career in academia, right? So if you're looking to make a career shift and you say, I want out of the corporate environment, I want to be in academia, then a PhD is for you. And I've had colleagues who have done the same. One of my colleagues who was going through the PhD program with me, he was a retired colonel from the US Army and decided that, hey, he wanted to do something else in the next stage of his career. So you're never too old or too senior within your career field to switch over and choose a field, choose academia. If you're saying that's not quite for me, I want to stay in the corporate world, I just maybe want something a little bit different, want an advancement, I want to change my career, I want to become an expert in a field, or there's a problem that I'm looking to solve, then the DBA is more for you. The PhD does require a full-time commitment. They do pay for tuition, and you get a very, a pretty small stipend, enough to live off of, but nothing glamorous. Does not pay for the tuition. You can keep your full-time job. You can stay where you are. A lot of organizations do provide assistance for that, but the DBA program, there is a cost to that. So you do have to pay to go back to school. So that's something to consider. It's typically for the program at Drexel University. It's a 2.5, 3-year program. So in terms of time commitment, it is less than a PhD. It's not the 5, 6 years you typically think of for a PhD program. So there's that. But then there's also the trade-off, right? So there are going to be times where you're going to have to stay back from a social event and get your reading done or write a proposal. The time commitment is like a part-time job where you're either engaged in reading, writing, talking with your classmates. So it's probably at least 20 hours a week that you're going to look to put into it to go back for a DBA. But if you're thinking that you want something more, I know for me, I wanted that intellectual challenge. I had problems that were bugging me that I wanted to know how to solve and address. If that's kind of the way you think and you want to be able to take something back and make a difference, then maybe a DBA is right for you.
And with that, there's another question from David, who did ask about the difference between PhD and DBA, but which you just mentioned, but his follow-up question, which I thought was very interesting, is, do you think employers view them differently?
So the simple answer is no. I don't think in the corporate world, it's a doctorate degree, right? You will be Dr. David, right? Regardless of if you have a PhD or a DBA. I think that there is still, even just based on the questions coming in, I think there are questions, what's the difference here? So I don't think a lot of people really understand the difference. And so a doctorate's a doctorate. Right? There is still the same percentage of people get a DBA as a PhD. It's 1 or 2% of the world's population that has this. They're both terminal degrees. They both offer that research approach, whether it's applied or not. So I in my experience, based on, and we've had 7 or 8 classes come through with our DBA program, and I do a lot of work through our corporate executive education program at Drexel, and I've never seen the DBA or the PhD being looked at differently.
I feel like that's mostly the main people's questions, is what's the difference? Is it less important or as important? Or I feel like people's main goal is like, will an employer look at it differently, or is it the same in people's eyes? And I think you answered it perfectly by saying, like, It's the same. It's a doctorate at the end of the day.
It is. There's no difference. It's just what are you looking to do with it at the end of the day?
Well, thank you so much, Lauren. I had a great time learning about a PhD journey, what it takes to get a PhD, what are the words of affirmation to get over the imposter syndrome, whether you're pursuing a PhD or just going on in your life in the corporate world. Thank you so much. I had such a great time learning, and I'm sure so many people tuning into this episode are gonna take your words and apply them to their lives, especially introverts out there. I just want to say for everyone tuning in, thank you so much. And don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe.
Thanks for having me here. This has been a blast.
Thank you.